So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Was an Uchiha clan leader? So let's start without wasting any time. Kanahagakure no Sato, the hidden village in Leaves. Outside the walls, the village looks peaceful. It seems so peaceful that travelers forget about their travels and decide to live within the village. The man who leads the village is also known to be a peaceful man. But that was another world, another life, another name whispered by lips long since turned to dust. Dawn came to Winterfell as it always did, grey and patient, seeping through the weirwood's crimson leaves like water through old stone. The castle stirred slowly, its servants moving through corridors worn smooth by generations of footsteps, its lords and ladies still wrapped in furs against the morning chill. In the godswood, a man sat beneath the heart tree. He did not look like a man who had seen dynasties crumble. His hair was still gold as summer wheat, his eyes still blue as the waters of the shivering sea, though if one looked closely, and few ever did, there was something in those eyes that spoke of distances no map could measure. He wore simple gray robes, travel-stained but clean, and his hands rested easily on his knees as he watched the steam rise from the hot springs. "Father says you knew Brandon the Builder." The voice came from behind him, young and bright with mischief. Naruto did not turn. He had sensed the boy's approach long before he spoke, the particular weight of small feet on fallen leaves, the quick rhythm of a curious heart. "Your father," Naruto said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, "has been telling you too many stories, Bran." The boy scrambled over a moss-covered root and dropped onto the ground beside him, all gangly limbs and endless questions. Bran Stark was 7, though he would tell anyone who asked that he was nearly 8, and he had decided 3 winters past that the quiet man who sometimes visited the godswood was the most interesting person in all of Winterfell. "Did you, though? Know him?" Naruto looked up at the carved face in the weirwood. The sap pooled in its eyes like frozen tears, red against bone-white bark. "I knew a Brandon Stark," he said carefully. "Whether he was the one who built these walls, the years have a way of blurring together, little wolf." Bran frowned, unsatisfied with this answer, but before he could press further, another voice cut through the morning quiet. "Bran! Mother says you haven't broken your fast." Rob appeared at the edge of the clearing, already dressed for the yard in leather and mail, his auburn hair catching the first true light of morning. He was 14 now, broad-shouldered and serious in the way that firstborn sons often are, but his face softened when he saw them beneath the tree. "Good morrow, Master Naruto. I should have known he'd be here." "Rob." Naruto inclined his head. "Your brother was just keeping in old man company." "You're not old," Bran said immediately. "You don't look old at all." "Appearances," Naruto said, rising with the fluid ease of someone who had never known the stiffness of age, "can be deceiving." He reached down and ruffled Bran's hair, and for just a moment, his hand lingered, as if he were feeling the shape of the boy's skull, memorizing the warmth of his scalp, the particular brightness of his spirit. "Go. Eat. Your mother worries." Bran scrambled up, already running before he was fully standing. "Will you come to the yard later? To watch?" "If the day allows." The boy disappeared through the trees, Rob following with a respectful nod. Naruto watched them go, and his smile faded slowly, like the last embers of a fire. "They are always so young," he thought. "And I am always so old." He had been in Westeros for longer than he cared to remember. He had arrived in an age of heroes and walked through centuries of blood and iron. He had watched the Undulls come with their 7-pointed star, had seen the first men driven north, had stood silent witness as the children of the forest retreated deeper into the green places of the world. He had loved, in those early years. He had lost. He had learned that immortality was not a gift but a sentence, to watch, to remember, to carry the weight of every face that had ever smiled at him and then grown old and died. The Starks, though. The Starks he had chosen. It was not the blood itself that bound him. It was something in the way they stood, generation after generation, against the cold and the dark and the grasping ambitions of lesser men. The words of their house were not a boast but a promise. Winter is coming. And Naruto, who had once been a boy who shouted his dreams to an uncaring sky, understood better than most what it meant to prepare for darkness. He found Ned Stark in the yard an hour later, watching the boys train under Ser Roderick's critical eye. The Lord of Winterfell was a man carved from duty and silence, his long face solemn even in repose, but when he saw Naruto approach, something in his gray eyes shifted, not quite warmth, but recognition. The acknowledgement of one keeper of secrets to another. "You've heard," Ned said. It was not a question. "The ravens have been flying for days. Even the trees whisper of a king's procession." Ned's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Robert is coming north. He means to ask something of me. Something you do not wish to give. Something I cannot refuse." They stood together in silence, watching Bran swing a wooden sword with more enthusiasm than skill, watching Robb correct his brother's stance with the patience of an heir who understood the weight of example. "I would ask a favor," Ned said at last, his voice dropping so that only Naruto could hear. "When I go south, if I go south, I would ask you to accompany my family." Naruto closed his eyes. The wind stirred the gray cloak around his shoulders, carrying the scent of pine and snow and something else, something that tasted of change. "Ned, you know what you're asking. The South is dangerous." "I know." Ned turned to face him fully. "That is why I ask. My daughters will need protection. My sons. Caitlin." He paused. "John." Ah. There it was. The boy who carried the secret of dynasties in his dark, stark features, the promise made to a dying sister, the lie that had protected him for 14 years. Naruto had been there, at the Tower of Dorne. He had held Lyanna's hand as the life bled out of her, had caught the newborn's first cry in the palm of his hand, had watched Ned Stark choose love over honor for the first and only time in his life. "You know I would die for any of them," Naruto said quietly. "But the South is a nest of vipers. I have spent lifetimes avoiding the games of kings. I am not asking you to play. I am asking you to watch." A horn sounded from the walls. The Outriders had spotted the royal procession. Naruto looked toward the gate, and for a moment, something ancient flickered in his eyes, not fear, never that, but a weariness that went bone deep. He had seen kings before. He had seen them rise in fire and fall in blood, had watched the Iron Throne consume every soul foolish enough to covet it. But these were his people. This was his family, in every way that mattered. "I will go," he said at last. "Not for the king. Not for the realm. For them." Ned nodded once, his relief visible only in the slight loosening of his shoulders. "Thank you." The gates groaned open. The Baratheon stag and the Lannister lion rode into Winterfell in a storm of silk and steel and southern arrogance, and Naruto watched it all with the patience of mountains and the stillness of deep water, knowing that the game was beginning again. It always began again. Chapter 2: The Fall That Never Happened. The feast was a cacophony of roast meat and spilled wine and laughter that rang too loud beneath the ancient beams of the great hall. Naruto ate sparingly, seated at the lower tables where he could observe without being observed, a gray ghost among servants and household guards. The king was fatter than he remembered, red-faced and booming, a warrior drowning in the soft pleasures of peace. The queen watched everything with eyes like green ice, her smile never quite reaching her cheeks. Naruto had known women like Cersei Lannister before. He had known men like Jaime, too beautiful and broken in ways that made them dangerous. When the feast ended and the castle settled into the heavy silence of too much drink, Naruto did not sleep. He rarely did anymore. Instead, he walked the walls, feeling the old stones breathe beneath his feet, listening to the thousand small sounds of a castle at rest. It was the silence that warned him. The broken tower rose against the moon like a skeletal finger, abandoned and half forgotten. No one went there. No one except Naruto moved before the scream could form. He had lived so long that time itself had become a suggestion. The chakra that flowed through his veins was older than the gods would, older than the wall, older than any magic this world still remembered. When he called upon it, the world slowed to a crawl, each moment stretching like honey poured from a jar. He saw the boy falling. Bran's arms pinwheeled in the frozen air, his mouth open in a silent cry, his eyes wide with the incomprehension of a child who could not understand why the tower had betrayed him. Above, silhouetted against the window, a figure stood motionless, golden hair catching the moonlight, a hand still extended from the push. Jaime Lannister. The name burned through Naruto's mind like lightning, but there was no time for anger, no space for the cold fury that would come later. He crossed the distance between the wall and the tower in 3 strides that consumed the air itself, and when Bran's small body reached the ground, it was not stone that received him. It was ancient arms, wrapped in gray cloth and impossible strength. The impact shuddered through Naruto's frame, but he held firm, cradling the boy against his chest as gently as he had once cradled his father. Bran's eyes were closed. His breathing came in shallow, hitching gasps. Blood matted the dark hair at his temple where his head had struck the tower's edge during the fall. "Shoo," Naruto whispered, though the boy could not hear him. "Shoo, little wolf. I have you." The healing chakra that flowed from his palms was green as summer leaves, warm as sunlight on still water. Naruto had learned healing in another lifetime, from hands far gentler than his own, and he called upon those lessons now with the precision of centuries of practice. The bleeding stopped. The fractured skull began to knit. But some injuries even he could not fully mend, the damage was deep, delicate, woven into the fragile architecture of the mind. Bran would live. But he would not walk. Naruto sat in the shadow of the broken tower for a long time, holding the unconscious boy while the moon traced its slow arc across the sky. He thought of all the children he had failed to save, all the small bodies he had been too late to catch. He thought of the promise he had made to Ned Stark just hours before. For them. At last, when the eastern sky began to lighten, he rose and carried Bran to Maester Luwin's chambers. The old maester's face went pale when he saw them, but he asked no questions. He had learned long ago that the golden stranger who haunted Winterfell's shadows operated by rules beyond his understanding. Later, after the family had gathered, after Catelyn's tears and Ned's silent anguish, after the maester had delivered his grim prognosis, Naruto found Ned alone in his solar. "There's more," Naruto said quietly. "Things you need to know before you ride south." He told Ned what he had sensed in the broken tower. Not what he had seen, his eyes had been fixed on Bran's falling body, but what he had felt. The 2 signatures of chakra, tangled together in an intimacy that spoke of long familiarity. The panic that had spiked through them both when they realized they were observed. And later, what his subtle techniques had uncovered, whispers in the kennels, snatches of conversation between Lannister guardsmen too drunk to guard their tongues, patterns of movement and secrecy that painted a picture as damning as it was dangerous. "The Queen and her brother," Ned said, and the word seemed to age him 10 years. "You're certain?" "I am certain that if you accuse them without proof that will survive the scrutiny of the court, you will be branded a traitor and your family will suffer." Naruto met Ned's gray eyes with his own ancient blue. "Robert is not the man you knew. The court is a battlefield more treacherous than any you've faced. If you go south, you go into the heart of their power, surrounded by men who owe their loyalty to Lannister gold." "What would you have me do? Stay here while Jon Arryn's murder goes unanswered? While the realm staggers toward chaos?" "I would have you be careful." Naruto placed a hand on Ned's shoulder, and for a moment, the Lord of Winterfell looked less like a man preparing for war and more like the boy he had once been, earnest, honorable, and utterly unprepared for the nest of vipers awaiting him. "I would have you remember that the truth is a weapon that cuts both ways. And I would have you trust me, when the time comes, to protect what you hold most dear." Ned closed his eyes.
I always have. Chapter 3: Wolves on the Road.
The morning of departure dawned cold and gray, the kind of day that tasted of the winter to come. The courtyard of Winterfell churned with activity, horses being saddled, wagons being loaded, guards shouting to one another over the clatter of steel and the whinnying of destriers. Amidst the chaos, the Stark family gathered for their farewells. Naruto found Jon Snow at the edge of the yard, standing apart as he always did, his dire wolf pup ghost a pale shadow at his heels. The boy had made his decision to join the Night's Watch with the same quiet dignity he brought to everything, accepting a life of service and celibacy as though it were a gift rather than an exile. "You're going south," Jon said, not quite meeting Naruto's eyes.
With father.
"With the girls."
I am. Good. That's good. A pause.
"They'll need you." Naruto studied the boy's face, the long stark features, the dark hair, the gray eyes that held depths even their owner had not yet fully explored. 14 years since he had carried this child through the mountains of Dorne, a bundle of screams and possibility wrapped in blood-stained cloth. 14 years of watching him grow in the shadow of a lie that protected him and wounded him in equal measure. "You're wondering," Naruto said, "if you're doing the right thing."
I'm wondering if there's anything else I can do. Jon's jaw tightened. I'm a bastard.
"There's no place for me here, not really."
Caitlin.
He trailed off, unwilling to speak ill of the woman who had raised him. "Your stepmother's feelings are her own burden to bear," Naruto said carefully. He did not mention the promise he had extracted from her, the long conversations over the years that had slowly, painstakingly shifted her resentment toward acceptance. Some truths were not his to share. "But your worth, Jon Snow, has never been determined by the circumstances of your birth. It is determined by your choices.
Your honor.
Your heart."
I don't know who I am. Then go and find out.
Naruto reached out and gripped the boy's shoulder, and for just a moment, he let the mask slip, let Jon see the centuries of loss and love that lived behind his ageless eyes.
The wall is not a punishment. It is a proving ground.
And when the darkness comes, as it always does, the realm will need men who know how to stand against it. Jon looked at him then, truly looked, and something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words.
Will I see you again?
If the gods allow it. Naruto smiled, and the expression transformed his face, banishing the shadows for a single, sunlit moment.
I have a promise to keep to your sister.
He found Arya near the stables, scowling at the elegant dress her mother had forced her into. The girl was 9 years old and already more wolf than lady, all sharp edges and defiant courage. When she saw him approach, her face lit up with the particular brightness she reserved for people who understood her.
Are you coming with us? Father said you're coming with us. I am. Good. The South is stupid and I hate it already, but at least you'll be there. She paused, then added with the brutal honesty of childhood, "You're the only one who doesn't treat me like I'm broken." "You're not broken, Arya." Naruto knelt to meet her eyes. "You're a blade still being forged. But even the finest steel requires patience. Discipline." He tapped her chest, just above her heart. "You have fire. That is a gift. But fire uncontrolled burns everything it touches, including the one who wields it. I just want to learn. To fight. To be strong enough that no one can." She stopped, her jaw working silently. "That no one can hurt the people you love," Naruto finished. "I know." He rose, and his hand moved to his belt, where a small object wrapped in cloth had waited since dawn. "Your brother Jon asked me to give you this." Arya unwrapped the cloth with trembling fingers, revealing the slender blade within. Needle. She looked up at him, her gray eyes, stark eyes, wolf eyes suddenly bright with tears she refused to shed. "When we meet again," Naruto said, "I will oversee your training myself. But only if you promise me something." "Anything." Master discipline before you master the blade. Learn patience before you learn to kill.
And never forget that true strength serves others, not yourself.
Arya nodded solemnly, clutching needle to her chest like a talisman. I promise.
The caravan stretched for half a mile as it wound its way south, a glittering serpent of banners and armor and wheeled cages. Naruto rode near the center of the column, close enough to the wheelhouse to hear Sansa's excited chatter about princes and tourneys, close enough to watch Ned's straight back as he rode beside the king. The land changed slowly around them, the deep green of the north giving way to the softer, gentler hills of the riverlands, the sharp bite of the wind mellowing into something almost warm.
But Naruto felt none of it. There was a darkness ahead. He could sense it like the pressure before a storm, like the wrongness in the air that preceded an earthquake. The Iron Throne was more than a seat of power. It was a wound in the world, a hunger that had consumed kings and queens and would-be conquerors for 300 years. And somewhere in the shadows beyond it, something older stirred. This is not about politics, he thought, as King's Landing finally appeared on the horizon, a sprawl of stone and squalor rising around the Red Keep like supplicants around a bloody altar. This is the beginning of something larger. Something I have not felt since the war that had shaped him. Since the battle against a goddess who had sought to enslave all of humanity in an endless dream. He had thought that fight was over. He had been wrong. The true battle ahead would not be won by strength alone. He had learned that lesson across centuries of watching, waiting, guiding without commanding. It would require wisdom, loyalty, the courage to protect those who could not protect themselves. And perhaps, if the gods were merciful, it would require nothing more terrible than that. But Naruto Uzumaki, the Golden Sage, the immortal wanderer, the guardian of Winterfell's bloodline, knew better than to trust in mercy. He nudged his horse forward and followed the road south, into the heart of the storm. Winter is coming, the Starks whispered. And for the first time in centuries, Naruto believed it. Chapter 4: The Red Keep. King's Landing stank. Naruto had forgotten how profoundly, how aggressively, how unapologetically the city assaulted the senses. The smell rolled over the walls in waves, night soil and rotting fish, unwashed bodies and smoke from 1,000 cookfires, the particular sweetness of death that hung around the gutters where corpses sometimes lay for days before anyone bothered to drag them away. It was the smell of humanity pressed too close together, of ambition curdling into desperation, of a city that had grown like a cancer around the Iron Throne. I have seen cities fall, Naruto thought, guiding his horse through the throng that parted instinctively around the royal procession. Uzushio, swallowed by the sea. Konoha, rebuilt from ashes. But this is a different kind of ruin. A slow rot, from the inside out. Beside him, Sansa pressed her face to the window of the wheelhouse, her eyes wide with wonder rather than disgust. She saw the banners, the knights in their gleaming armor, the pennants snapping in the breeze from the Blackwater. She did not see the hollow-eyed children begging in the alleys, the bruises on the arms of the women who hurried past with their heads down, the gold cloaks who collected their bribes with the casual ease of long practice. He did not blame her. She was a child who had been raised on songs. The waking world would teach her soon enough. The Red Keep rose before them like a crimson cliff, its towers clawing at the sky. Naruto felt the weight of it pressing against his senses, not just the stone and mortar, but something beneath. Something hungry. The Iron Throne had been forged in dragonfire, but it had been tempered in blood, and blood remembered. Blood called. You feel it too. Ned had fallen back to ride beside him, his gray stallion dwarfed by the royal guards who flanked the king's party ahead. The Lord of Winterfell looked tired already, his long face drawn with the particular exhaustion of an honest man surrounded by liars. I feel many things, Naruto said quietly. Most of them unpleasant. Robert has named me Hand. The announcement will be made tonight. You knew he would. I hoped he might choose someone else. Stannis, perhaps. Or Renly? Ned's mouth twisted.
But Robert was never one to burden himself with what he did not wish to carry. And he does not wish to rule.
No, Naruto thought. He wishes to drink and hunt and forget the boy he used to be. The boy you loved. The man who is no longer there.
Aloud, he said only, then we must ensure you survive the burden he has given you. The Tower of the Hand was a stern, functional structure, and Naruto was grateful for its relative simplicity. He had been given a small chamber on the lower floor, little more than a cell with a window, but it suited him. He had slept in far worse places. He had slept in no places at all, during the years when he wandered the lands of always winter, learning the language of the children and the secrets of the old gods. He stood now at that window, watching the sun bleed into the black water, and let his mind drift outward. It was a technique he had developed over centuries, not quite sensing, not quite meditation, but something between. A gentle extension of awareness, like ripples spreading across still water. The Red Keep was a hive of secrets. He could feel them buzzing behind the walls, beneath the floors, in the darkened corners where servants whispered and lovers met and knives were sharpened in the dark. Somewhere in the castle, Varys the spider spun his webs of little birds. Somewhere else, Peter Baelish counted his coins and smiled his knowing smile. And in the highest towers, Cersei Lannister looked down upon them all with those cold green eyes, plotting murder she thought no one else could see. You almost killed a child, Naruto thought, and the thought was cold and still as a winter pond. You would have killed him, if I had been a heartbeat slower. And you would have slept soundly afterward, because he was nothing to you but an obstacle. He had killed before. He had killed more times than he could count, in wars that spanned worlds and centuries. But he had never killed a child. He had never looked upon innocence and decided it was expendable. The Lannisters would learn. One way or another, they would learn. A knock at the door broke his reverie. He turned to find Jory Castle standing in the doorway, his honest Northman's face troubled. Lord Stark asks if you'll join him for supper, Jory said. There's to be a small council meeting on the morrow, and he'd value your counsel. Tell him I'll be there. Jory hesitated. There's something else. We've had word from the wall. A deserter was caught near Winterfell before we left. Lord Stark executed him himself. He shook his head. The man was raving. Said he'd seen the others. The White Walkers. Naruto went very still. What did Lord Stark make of it? He said the man was mad with fear. That the old stories are just stories. Jory's eyes met his, and there was a question there, unspoken but clear. Are they? Thank you, Jory. I'll join Lord Stark shortly. When the door closed, Naruto turned back to the window. The sun had fully set now, and the first stars were beginning to emerge, cold and distant, indifferent to the machinations of kings and queens. The others, he thought. The long night. He had walked this land when the wall was young, when the magic that bound it was still raw and singing in the ice. He had spoken with the children of the forest in the deep places of the world, had learned the truth of what lay beyond the curtain of light at the edge of the known world. The others were not legend. They were not myth. They were a wound that had never fully healed, a darkness that had retreated but never been destroyed. And now, if the deserters' ravings held any truth, they were stirring again. This is why I stayed, he thought. Not for the Starks alone. For what they stand against. He closed his eyes and reached out with his senses, stretching north, north, ever north, past the Trident, past the Neck, past Winterfell and the wall and into the frozen silence beyond. For a long moment, he felt nothing. Then, at the very edge of his perception, something stirred. Something that tasted of winter eternal. Something that had been waiting, patient as death, for the world to forget it existed. Naruto opened his eyes. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long shadows across the stone floor.
Winter is coming, the Starks said. But winter had never truly left. Chapter 5: The Hands of the King. The small council chamber was a long room with a table of polished weirwood, and Naruto felt the ancient wood hum beneath his palm when he entered.
It was the only piece of the north in this southern court, a relic of some forgotten king who had sought to bind the old gods to his rule. The faces carved into the chair backs watched with empty eyes, and Naruto wondered if they remembered him.
He had known trees like these, once.
He had sat beneath their branches and listened to their slow, deep-rooted thoughts. Ned had asked him to attend as an advisor, a position with no title, no lands, no formal recognition. The other council members had eyed him with varying degrees of suspicion when he took his seat at the far end of the table, a gray ghost among peacocks. Another Northman, Littlefinger, had murmured, his smile sharp as a blade. "Lord Stark does love his retainers." "Master Naruto is a trusted friend of my house," Ned said, his voice brooking no argument.
"He speaks with my voice." Grand Maester Pycelle had nodded sagely, his chain clinking with every movement.
Varys had studied Naruto with those soft, powdered hands folded before him, his expression one of gentle curiosity. And Renly Baratheon, young and handsome and utterly bored, had barely glanced his way before returning to some private amusement. The meeting itself was tedious beyond measure. They spoke of debts owed to the Iron Bank, of trade disputes with the free cities, of a tourney to be held in the new hand's honor. Naruto listened without speaking, filing away every scrap of information, every flicker of expression, every silence that meant more than words. It was only afterward, when the others had filed out and Ned sat alone with his head in his hands, that Naruto spoke.
"You've learned something."
Ned looked up, and his eyes were haunted.
Jon Arryn was investigating something before he died. Something about Robert's children.
He paused, the weight of what he was about to say pressing down on him like a physical force.
He visited a blacksmith's shop. A boy who works there.
A boy with Baratheon features, the black hair, the blue eyes, and a mother who claims
Robert fathered him.
And all of Robert's trueborn children, Ned said slowly, all three of them, they have Lannister gold.
Every one.
Not a trace of the Baratheon look.
He met Naruto's ancient gaze.
You told me, before we left, that you sensed something in the broken tower.
That the queen and her brother.
Their relationship is treason, Naruto said quietly.
Their children are not Robert's. Jon Arryn discovered the truth, and it killed him.
The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. I must tell Robert.
Ned's voice was hollow. He will be furious. He will. He will have them executed. Cersei, Jaime, the children. Robert's rage is a wildfire, Ned.
Once lit, it consumes everything in its path.
Including the man who lit it. What would you have me do?
Let her get away with murder? Let her pass off her bastards as Robert's heirs?
Naruto was silent for a long moment.
In his mind's eye, he saw another queen, long ago, a woman with silver hair and a goddess's madness, who had sought to reshape the world according to her will. He had stopped her. He had saved the world from her dream of eternal peace. But the cost had been everything. His teacher. His friends. The boy he had once called brother, whose blood still stained his hands after all these centuries. I would have you be certain, he said at last.
Absolutely certain. Gather proof that cannot be dismissed. Witnesses who cannot be silenced.
And when you move with the full weight of the law behind you, not as a man accusing his king's wife of adultery, but as the hand of the king delivering justice.
And if she moves first? Then I will be here.
Naruto's eyes, ancient and sad and burning with a light that had no place in this world, met Ned's.
I have protected your family for generations. I will not fail now.
That night, he walked the secret passages of the Red Keep. He had found them easily enough, a whisper of air where no air should be, a seam in the stone too straight for nature. The Targaryens had built their fortress with secrets in its bones, and Naruto had spent centuries learning to read the language of hidden things. He moved through the walls like a ghost, his chakra suppressed to the faintest flicker, his footsteps silent on stone worn smooth by the passage of spiders and little birds. He found Varys's little birds first. Children, most of them, their tongues cut out and their eyes trained to see everything. They scurried through the passages with the confidence of long practice, carrying scraps of parchment and whispered secrets to their master. Naruto let them pass. They were tools, not enemies. He found passages that led to the queen's chambers, and he did not linger there. He found passages that led to the throne room, and he paused in the shadows to study the Iron Throne itself, that monstrous seat of twisted swords, jagged and asymmetrical and wrong in ways that had nothing to do with its physical form. The darkness he had sensed since entering the city radiated from it like heat from a forge. What are you? He wondered. What did Aegon forge, all those centuries ago? He found passages that led to the black cells, the dungeons, the forgotten places where men had screamed and died in the dark. And in one of those places, buried beneath layers of stone and silence, he found something unexpected. Dragon bones. They were ancient, these remains, far older than the Targaryen dynasty. They lay in a chamber that had been sealed for so long that the air itself had grown stale and heavy, and they radiated a power that made Naruto's chakra stir in recognition. He knelt beside the skull, massive, easily the size of a horse's body, and laid his hand on the black bone. You were not like the others, he thought. You were something older. Something wilder. The bone was cold beneath his touch, but deep within, so faint he almost missed it, something flickered. A spark. A memory. A dream of fire. Naruto withdrew his hand. The darkness around the Iron Throne, the stirring beyond the wall, and now this dragons buried in the depths of the Red Keep, their embers not yet fully extinguished. The pieces were there. He simply could not yet see how they fit together. He rose and continued his exploration, and if his footsteps were heavier than before, if his shoulders carried a weight they had not carried when he descended, there was no one in the darkness to see it. Chapter 6: The Lion and the Wolf. The confrontation, when it came, was not the one Naruto expected. He had anticipated Cersei to strike first, a cup of poison, perhaps, or a knife in the dark, or some subtle political maneuver designed to discredit Ned before he could reveal the truth. The queen was patient, but she was also proud, and proud people made mistakes when cornered. Instead, it was Jaime Lannister who came for him. Naruto was in the Godswood, a pale imitation of the North's ancient groves, with its carefully cultivated trees and its manufactured silences, when he heard the distinctive step of armored boots on fallen leaves. He did not turn. He had sensed the Kingslayer's approach from the moment the man entered the grove, his chakra signature bright with arrogance and something darker beneath. Golden Sage, Jaime said, the title dripping with mockery. The Stark's pet wizard. I've heard stories about you. There are many stories about me, Naruto replied, still not turning. Most of them are wrong. They say you never age. They say you were there when Brandon the Builder raised the wall. They say you're a god. A pause, and the mockery sharpened to something like genuine curiosity. Are you? Now Naruto turned. Jaime Lannister stood 10 paces away, his white cloak spotless, his golden hand resting on his sword hilt. He was beautiful in the way that fire was beautiful, bright and consuming and utterly without mercy. But there was something else in his green eyes, something that looked almost like fear. I am no god, Naruto said. I am simply a man who has lived too long and seen too much. And what have you seen, I wonder? Jaime took a step closer. What did you see, that day at Winterfell? When the Stark boy fell? The question hung between them, sharp as a blade. I saw a child pushed from a tower, Naruto said, and his voice was very quiet. I saw him falling.
And I caught him. Before or after he struck the ground? Does it matter? It matters, Jamie said, if he remembers. If he wakes and tells someone what he thinks he saw. What he thinks he saw. The phrasing was careful. Jamie was not admitting anything. He was fishing, testing the waters, trying to determine how much danger he and his sister were in. Bran remembers nothing, Naruto said, and it was not entirely a lie. The boy's memories of that day were fractured, clouded by trauma and pain. The maester said he might never recall exactly what happened. But I remember everything, said Jamie. I always do. The threat was subtle, but Jamie heard it. His hand tightened on his sword. Then perhaps you should learn to forget, he said softly. For your own sake. And for Lord Stark's. Is that a threat? A warning. From one man who understands the weight of secrets to another. Jamie's smile was a slash of white in the gathering dusk. You think you're protecting them. The Starks. The children. But all you're doing is painting a target on their backs. The Game of Thrones is not played with honor, Golden Sage. It's played with blood. Naruto looked at him for a long moment. He saw the arrogance, the cruelty, the casual disregard for life that had allowed this man to shove a child from a window without a second thought. But he also saw something else, a flicker of the boy Jamie had once been, the idealistic young knight who had dreamed of honor and glory before the world taught him that honor was a lie. I know what you did, Naruto said quietly. Why you killed Ares. I know about the wildfire. Jamie's face went slack with shock. The Mad King meant to burn this city to ashes. He planted caches of wildfire throughout the tunnels, beneath the streets, beneath the homes of every man, woman, and child in King's Landing. And when your father's army breached the gates, Ares gave the order to light them. Naruto's voice was level, almost gentle. You killed him to stop it. You broke your oath to save 500,000 lives. Jamie's voice cracked. How do you? No one knows. No one but. I know because I found the wildfire. 30 years ago, when I first visited this city in another guise. I found the caches and I dispersed them, rendered them inert. But I recognized the remnants of what Ares had planned. And I wondered, for a very long time, why the Mad King's pyromancers never lit the flames. He met Jamie's eyes. They never lit them because you killed them too. All of them. Every man who knew the plan. Jamie was shaking. Not with fear, with something closer to rage, or grief, or the unbearable weight of a secret carried for too many years. I saved this city, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I saved them all. And they called me Kingslayer. Oathbreaker. Man without honor. Yes, Naruto said. And then you pushed a child from a window. The words hit Jamie like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his composure shattered, his hand falling away from his sword. I am not your enemy, Jamie Lannister. But I am not your ally either. Not yet. Naruto turned and began to walk away, his gray robes blending into the shadows of the godswood. The boy will live. He may even walk again, in time, if my healing holds. But the man who pushed him from that tower, that man is still standing in front of me. And I have not yet decided what to do with him. He paused at the edge of the clearing, looking back over his shoulder. You have a choice to make. You can continue down this path, protecting your sister's secrets, killing whoever threatens your family, and you will become the monster they already believe you to be. Or you can remember the knight you wanted to become. The one who saved a city and asked for nothing in return. And if I choose the monster? Naruto's smile was sad and ancient and colder than any winter Jamie had ever known. Then I will do what I have always done. Protect the innocent. And pray that you find your way back to the light before it's too late. He vanished into the trees, leaving the Kingslayer alone with his ghosts.
That night, Naruto sat by the window of his chamber and watched the moon rise over the Blackwater. The confrontation with Jamie had been necessary, but it had also been a gamble. He had revealed knowledge that no one should possess, had exposed a secret that Jamie had guarded for 17 years. The Kingslayer would report back to Cersei, and Cersei would realize that the quiet gray man in Lord Stark's retinue was far more dangerous than she had assumed.
Let her realize, Naruto thought.
Let her scheme and plot and sharpen her knives. I have faced worse than a pride of lions.
I have faced gods.
But even as the thought crossed his mind, he felt the darkness pressing against the edges of his awareness. The Iron Throne's hunger. The stirring beyond the wall. The dragon bones sleeping in the depths of the Red Keep.
The pieces were moving. The game was beginning.
And Naruto Uzumaki, who had once been a boy with a demon in his belly and a dream in his heart, who had become a sage and a guardian and a legend whispered around winter fires, settled deeper into his chair and waited for the next move.
He was very good at waiting.
He had had centuries of practice.